Hello there, a very warm welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. You're watching Smart 24 TV, where we do drive your business. And my name is Anthony Sebali, and I am your host. This is another edition of Financial Markets. It's a Tuesday, the 21st of Feb. And yes, we're here for another day of trade and investment. Remember, the show is proudly brought to you by Altex East Africa, your number one private stock exchange. With Altex East Africa, we are saying treasury bonds, treasury bills across East Africa have been made accessible with your smartphone. Now, you can be able to buy treasury bonds across East Africa with Altex at the convenience of your phone. You can simply grab your phone right now and simply dial *292#. And following the prompts, you will be able to access these financial instruments across East Africa. Now, also remember that the Altex platform is utilized offline, so you don't need to have data on your phone to be able to access the platform or to be able to trade on any of the financial instruments you may want to trade on this particular platform. They are regulated by the the Uganda Capital Markets Authority, and the Uganda Capital Markets Authority is a body mandated by the government of Uganda to regulate, to control, and promote the trades on the capital markets here in Uganda. They started way back in 2017, and since then they have been able to hold that license and have been able to help people trade. Last year, the ZABU initiative was brought into the picture to help bring other people into the investment realm by making it easy for them to access the market. Now, with this code, you can find it nowhere in East Africa where you can be able to buy or sell treasury bonds at as little as 15,000 Ugandan shillings. That is the starting price there for you to be able to purchase one single instrument, and that's only found at Altex East Africa. And Altex East Africa says this is something new because no one in East Africa has been able to innovate this much when it comes to investment in the treasury bonds. Markets open at 8:15 and close at 3 p.m. East African Standard Time. Altex East Africa, do something new. Well, let's get to dive into the business of stock exchange here in Uganda before, of course, getting to head off to other stock exchanges in Africa. Generally speaking about Africa, Monday looked pretty good on most of the biggest stock exchanges here in Africa. Basically, looking at the overview for all the performances, Zimbabwe Stock Exchange appreciated over 319.1 points on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange All Share Index. The Nigerian Stock Exchange also moved up 419 points on the benchmark index. That's the All Share Index. When you look into Johannesburg Stock Exchange, they appreciated 557.61 points, and as well Ghana Stock Exchange maintained their points on their All Share Index, which is famously known as the Ghana Consumer Price Index. Now, Nairobi unfortunately had a little bit of retraction in the markets trading there, with the stocks going down, mainly the big stocks, and that of course affected the All Share Index negatively. But also looking at the rest of Africa, things looked pretty much better as well on the markets here in Africa. Now, Uganda Securities Exchange in particular had a fair day with just a single equity participating in the trades, and you can guess him right away there. That was Umeme. Umeme was the only listing that traded on the Uganda Securities Exchange on Monday. Now, as the data recorded on Monday, the volume at Umeme was 207,757 shares. At this particular volume, the company accrued a total turnover of over 62.327 million Ugandan shillings. Comparing with the previous day, that was Friday, the trading actually had an improvement of over 398% in the volume and 850% as well in the turnover. That shows you how much little trade happened last Friday, but it was a little bit more spread out comparing it to today's trade, or rather yesterday's trading on the Uganda Securities Exchange. Now, across the exchange on the gainers board, the companies that gained were 3 in number, led by Nation Media Group, who came out on top of the equities at the Uganda Securities Exchange with a total gain of 2.61%, up to a price of 452.29 Ugandan shillings. And the East African Breweries Limited stock as well gained 0.94% at a total closing price of 5,296.17 Ugandan shillings. Equity Bank Limited, the most valuable stock on the Uganda Securities Exchange, had a total gain of 0.4% in price, up to a price of 1,352.49 Ugandan shillings. That's currently on the gainers list on the Uganda Securities Exchange. But on the other hand, the bottom losers, mainly still cross listings from Nairobi, were from the bottom, led by Centum at the bottom with a total loss of 0.70%, the biggest for the first day of trading. Now, Centum investment stock closed at 260.29 shillings. A little better pricing for this week than last week, but still a little bit not where we want Centum to be. You know, we used to have Centum, at least amongst the cross listings, that were a little bit more active. 2023 doesn't seem to relate to that story when it comes to Centum investment stock. But well, we hope definitely things get better a little bit along the way as we progress forward into the year 2023. But remember, Centum is currently at least one of those companies that were able to do something, especially amongst the cross listings on the Uganda Securities Exchange. It is no news that cross listings on the exchange are inactive, but at least Centum has tried to put up a good fight, though not in 2023, as per what we are seeing on the trading here of the board of the Uganda Securities Exchange. KCB Group also lost value, a total of close to 0.061, rather 0.16%, and this was to close at 1,127.81 Ugandan shillings per share. And Kenya Airways as well lost furthermore of its price down to 111.76. Kenya Airways has also lost significantly over the past couple of days on the Uganda Securities Exchange. We shall check out Kenya Airways as well on the Nairobi and see if the same story is actually being told on this particular one. Jubilee Holdings Limited stock also lost 0.03% value, down to 5,339.94 Ugandan shillings per share. That's currently the lists that are portrayed on the board of the Uganda Securities Exchange amongst the gainers and the losers. Now, Wumeme stock, like I mentioned, did have the biggest volume, and of course it was the only stock that traded on the Uganda Securities Exchange. I hope one day we could have more activity, if only Ugandans get to interest themselves in our very own business of trading on the capital markets here in Uganda. Capital markets are so important, but it seems we have not yet fully embraced what the capital markets have to offer to us. When you look into the big companies that do trade on the exchange, usually it's by big volumes from individuals, from particularly the same people trading over and over again. And we need to break that ice, because right now, as we speak, many companies are getting a lot of value from stock markets around the world. Stock markets do actually make companies, because this is just not a platform where you find companies trading and people buying shares and selling out of speculations, but also a platform to raise capital. So if you want to tell how healthy an economy is, you definitely can look at its stock exchange, because this is a market where everyone comes to get capital. Cheap capital, no cost at all. And we Ugandans are taking it for granted. How I wish we could do much better in this line and get interest ourselves in our own stock market. Now, Umeme was the only listing that participated in trading. And when you look into the value here of Umeme, the value was maintained at 487 billion Ugandan shillings, at the maintaining of their trading price at 300.0 Ugandan shillings. Now, currently, Umeme represents a stock of 2.33% of the entire Uganda Securities Exchange equities market. At the moment, also, when you look at the volume of 207,757 shares that were traded, the gross turnover from these was 62.3 million shares on the market. Now, at the moment, we have 1.62 billion shares out there, though, of course, following the notice by Umeme to exit Uganda in 2025 after the expiration of their concession with the government of Uganda as the sole distributors and suppliers of electricity in Uganda. The stock rose consequent of that notice, and that was quite a surprise. We wouldn't expect that, because when a company puts up such a notice, it is an indicator that probably they will not, there will be delisting on the exchange, and that sometimes, you know, has fear running down the spines of investors, and they do sometimes panic sell, and you see a stock falling from the sky downwards. But this wasn't the case for Umeme. The moment Umeme said we are exiting, the stock price started rising. And as you know, stock prices are determined by demand and supply. So when the demand is high and the supply is limited, you definitely have a lot of pressure on the available few shares for sale, and that means that investors are willing to buy even at higher prices, and so the prices move upwards, because every buyer is looking at, rather every seller is looking at selling at the highest price to make the maximum profit, right? And that's the same business on the stock exchange. And so this is how Umeme's stock price went up consequent of that particular notice back in December. We are talking about a company in the last 3 months, that is between November 16th to February 20th, that has gained over 50%. That's just how much value people have been able to gain from the exchange, just from Umeme. So literally saying, if you had 50 billion invested in Umeme last year in November, right now, that amount is worth 100 billion. You've added twice. That's 50% increment. And that's the beauty of trading on the Uganda Securities or any other stock exchange, because anytime your value could go up at a blink of an eye, and that can happen also the other way around. You could lose that value in the same direction, but that's the business. I mean, no risk, no gain. That's exactly the business of trading on the exchange, but also trading anywhere else. If you don't take enough risks, don't expect much gains, right? When you look into Umeme's stock on the 20th of February yesterday, their closing price was 300 shillings, and Umeme began the year at 275 shillings. After that, rise in price from 200 shillings to 210 to 220, upwards to 275 at the beginning of the year. And since then, they have gained about 9.09% as well in their year to date, and meaning they are the biggest gainers of the year to date at the moment on the Uganda Securities Exchange. Also, in the last quarter, the company has maintained a volume of close to over 26.2 million shares that have been traded on the Uganda Securities Exchange, valued at 6.67 billion shillings over the period, with an average of 416,018 shares traded per trading session. That's exactly what Umeme is doing on the exchange. Currently, Umeme stock is quite limited in supply, but the demand is still there. And we have seen a little bit of leveling off in the pricing at 300 shillings. It seems investors are comfortable with that kind of pricing at the moment. But anytime, anywhere, Umeme will be able to delist from the exchange. Like I said, they will not be reaching 2025 as a company that supplies electricity in Uganda. That's when their concession is actually ending with the government of Uganda. So if you want to get in, yes, try your best. You can buy yourself some shares and try to talk your stockbroker into getting you some of this stock. Remember, to buy shares, you first of all need a Securities Central Depository account. This SCD account, or the Securities Central Depository, is going to be the bank, literally the bank, where you're going to be able to store your shares after buying them. To open one, you simply need to visit www.use.org.org and go to the Easy Portal. Easy Portal is a way, it's like a kind of a web where you're going to go and be able to put in your details, your email, and the Uganda Securities Exchange will be able to capture that and get to open that account for you. Remember, this is all under the jurisdiction of the Capital Markets Authority of Uganda, mandated by the government of Uganda. So you're not going to lose your money. Your money is going to be safe, especially if you deal with licensed entities like licensed stockbrokers such as UAP. We do have SBG Securities, Dyer and Blair, Cheaper Technologies, as well as when you look at UAP, Old Mutual Services. Those are some of the brokers that you can deal with to be safe and secure. That's it from the Uganda Securities Exchange. In summary, the all-share index climbed 3.14 points due to gains mainly from the cross listings on the Uganda Securities Exchange, and they're currently representing a 1-week gain of 1.57% and a 4-week gain of 0.36%. An overall year-to-date gain of 0.47% is being enjoyed on the all-share index on the Uganda Securities Exchange. The local company index still maintains their value at 273.25 points, meaning basically the domestic listings have remained stagnant in the past 24 hours. Now, across over to Nairobi Securities Exchange, the busiest and biggest stock exchange here in Uganda. Nairobi Securities Exchange had 46 equities participate in trading out of the 65 listings on the busiest stock market in East Africa. Now, the day ended with 16 gainers and 20 losers in a market that saw the all-share index drop of over 0.91 points. Express Kenya once again came on top of the gainers with a gain of 9.76%, and that was closing at a price of 4.95 Kenyan shillings per share. East African Portland Cement Company also gained a 9.63%, whereas Flame Tree Group Holdings gained an 8.4% on their stock value. Kapchora Tea Company gained 7.14%. All these mainly listed on the growth enterprise market segment. Remember, that's the enterprise, well, that's the segment on the market where we have the small and medium enterprises, and they do have much more volatile stock. But for speculative buyers and sellers, this could be a good deal for you. Because I mean, their prices change rapidly each and every day, but I wouldn't advise a novice or anyone trying stocks for the first time to get into such stocks. You might be quite disappointed what can happen to your money on the exchange. Now, on the losing side, we had Nairobi Business Ventures as well come out last with a 9.5% price depreciation, down to about 3.43 Kenyan shillings per share. And General Limited as well, Kenya, lost 8.33%. And Nation Media Group, who gained on the Uganda Securities Exchange, lost on the Nairobi Securities Exchange a total value of about 4.19% at 771,000 shares, and Absa Bank at 583,000 shares on the market. Kabaseed Investments also had about 507,800 shares as well recorded, which was some of the biggest on the day. But overall, speaking on the volumes side, the volumes declined 31%. So the trading was a little less than that of Friday in terms of the volume, and the turnovers were declined by over 49%, and 6% decline in the deals was also registered. There was also a slight drop in the market capitalization of the Nairobi Securities Exchange at a closure of 1.98 trillion Kenyan shillings. There you have it, my friend. Thank you so much for watching and for getting to stay tuned on Smart 24 TV. Before we go, we want to look into what the US market looked like very briefly, but taking note as we talk about the US finally hit the 31 trillion debt ceiling. Remember, like the way we have our debt ceiling is at 50% GDP, debt to GDP ratio in Uganda. It means whenever it gets to that level, then we have to check here and there and see what we can do to take measures to reduce that debt. We call that the threshold, the debt threshold. Now in the United States, it is 31 trillion US dollars. As per yesterday, the US actually hit this figure of 31 trillion, and definitely that means a lot for investors. If you want to know more about what this means for you as an investor, especially if you are interested in investing abroad, you can get to check out our website at www.smart24tvnews.com for more of that information there as regards the stocks in the US. But closing yesterday, the S&P 500 closed at 8%, down to 4,079 US, dropped about gained about 0.39%, up to 33,826 points. The Nasdaq also lost about 0.58%, down to 11,787.27 points. Thank you so much once again for watching. Remember to check out OTEX East Africa, your #1 private stock exchange. With OTEX, we are saying you can do something new with your money, and that is simply by getting your phone and dialing *292#. Now, doing so and following the prompts will help you, first of all, to register, and after registering, you will be able to buy or sell treasury bonds on the East African market with as little as 15,000 Ugandan shillings. That's the deal breaker there, because you can find that nowhere in Uganda or even in East Africa. The markets at OTEX open at 8 a.m. and they close at 15 minutes past 3 p.m. East African Standard Time. Zabu, more money, no